Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Okay, are we rolling? Okay. All right, well, first of all, thank you very much.
Sure, thank you very
joining
much.
us today. Hi, Jessica and Sam, welcome. So you've met everybody?
Yes.
Okay, well then let's just jump right in, shall we?
Sure.
People will just, I hope, jump in with questions when they have them.
Okay.
But to get things started, let's talk about why are you running for Congress? Why now? What are your hopes if you get sent to Washington?
Okay, well, let me start a little bit. I'm really running for one reason. It's a pretty simple one, and that's because I want to make sure people can continue living in small towns and small cities in this district. We have fewer farmers than we've had in the past. They're much more efficient. They're feeding the world, fueling the world, and healing the world, but it doesn't take as many of them, so that puts a strain on our small town business districts. And so having come from a small town and having taught in rural communities my entire life, and having been an advocate for small towns, I decided that this was a pretty good reason. So that's what I'm focused on, and everything about my campaign has to do with that. Basically three components to it. First of all, education. I want to use our education system through preschool, through our great small colleges, community colleges, the hidden treasures, and our Regents University here in Ames to make sure that we can build a workforce. And I want to build on the work that we've already done in renewable fuels for the last 14, 15 years and with innovation. So it's about education, innovation. And that innovation not only includes what we've done with renewable fuels, but also I want to create another layer of economic opportunity, which I hope we can talk about a little bit more, which is really about biomanufacturing and creating small businesses in the small communities and small cities of the district that produce things like this soy football that are made from the plants that are growing within 10 or 15 miles of all the places where we live, because you can't ship those jobs overseas, and they're really good jobs that are meaningful because it will make it, we can make the case to our children that they'll be doing jobs that are going to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, as well as producing goods and goods that are actually made from things that we grow here. But the third part is connection. And connection is really about making sure that we rebuild our bridges, because they're the third worst in the country, and create the short rail and roads into the bioparks in places like here in Ames and like Fort Dodge, which is really focused on agriculture and creating bioproducts, and also most especially the information highway and making sure that we connect high-speed internet to every place in the district, so that people can be entrepreneurs and they can sell their goods and services really without leaving the places where they grew up. I think we've done a disservice to our young people in the state by defining their success with how far away they get from their hometowns, instead of really making the case to them that they don't need to leave. I have spoken, when I was preparing for my energy policy, I spoke to General Wesley Clark about this issue because he's very interested in it now, and he basically said that the jobs of the future, the Bill Gateses of the future, will actually be in energy, not in Silicon Valley and not about computers. And I think that we can make the case right here that we do energy better than any place else in the country, and that we can be a model for the country. And we actually have weathered the downturn in the economy because we did transform our economy over the last 12 to 14 years, so that we were no longer just producing corn and beans and shipping them down the river, but we added value to them. And arguably this district, and a lot of people don't quite understand the district yet, but it goes from Sioux City on the west, which is our largest city, to Ames and Mason City on the east and a little beyond. And in between and around those small cities are the richest farmland in the world. And this is arguably the richest agricultural space in the world, because we grow more corn, more beans, more hogs, produce more eggs. We have 2,000 of the state's 3,000 wind turbines, and we produce more ethanol. And this district also will have the first and third cellulosic ethanol plant in the country, which means that we've now moved on to the second generation of renewable fuels. So we have tremendous opportunity, and I want to make the case to people, as my dad did to me, in a letter that he sent me on yellow legal paper in 1974, here's the job. Here's the job for Tom, this is how much he'll make as a small town lawyer. Here's the job for you, this is how much you'll make as a small town teacher. Here are the 5 other reasons you should come home. So my goal is to make sure that everybody can write that letter to their children or grandchildren, or they can look them in the eye before they leave and say, here's the pathway, here's the education, here's the job, here's what you have to do to get that job, and that we can continue to make the case to our children that they can live, work, and raise their families right here, and be a part of a community, which to me is very important, but also to be a part of the global community. I think one of the most fascinating things that we can do here in Iowa and at the national level is create a whole new industry, which will be producing drop-in fuel, not the blended fuels, but drop-in fuels that will fuel our military. Because it's pretty ironic that we have to depend on foreign oil to fuel our military planes and ships, when we can produce it right here in Iowa and around the country. And what we're doing here can be reproduced around the country. So I just see this job very locally. I think that's what the founders intended in the beginning by saying that the Congress is the part of government closest to the people. And I want to redefine the job so that it doesn't really matter who the leader of my party is or anybody else's party, that I can still be doing the job for the people in this district. And so the way I see the district is, I see it the same way I see my students on the first day of school. There are 39 counties, and I've got 2 years instead of 1 year to make a difference in the lives of the people of this district. And so my job as a congressperson is to make sure I know each of those communities, each of the counties, each of the economic regions, and get to know them as quickly as possible, which I've been doing for the last 14 years. And then to figure out how I can help them maximize their potential, their economic potential. And that's my first and foremost goal. But I also think that a congressperson can open doors for people in terms of economic development in much the same way that the governor and lieutenant governor and I did when our administration was in charge. I was talking to a community leader in Carroll the other day who said, he was responding to something I said about hog manure being the best adherent to create asphalt in the future, one of the bioproducts we could be making. And he said, yes, we've actually been talking, I would like to talk, I would like to be talking to a company in St. Louis that's actually doing that, because Carroll County has more hogs than people and lots of hog manure, and they seem to think that would be a good fit. And he said, but they won't return my phone calls. Is that something that you as a congressperson could do for us? Well, sure, I've been doing that. My husband was doing it as governor. That's part of what that was. I spoke to Stephen Leaf, the president at Iowa State, and I think it's his goal, certainly my goal, to work in partnership to make sure that they expand their research opportunities here at Iowa State to help the communities in the northwest corner, north central part of Iowa, where their students come from and where they go back to, actually create the kind of economic opportunity that I'm talking about. And in order to do that, it means that you have to fund these research universities, certainly our land-grant universities. And I just noticed in the paper this morning, in the Des Moines Register this morning, that they were talking about with a map of how the resources have declined at the research universities in this country, and they were questioning whether we would be able to continue doing the kind of research that would create the economic growth that I'm certainly talking about. So I think that's a really, really compelling argument for making sure that we continue to fund the research arm of agriculture, certainly, as we move forward. But those are the 3 components, and I think that Congressman King and I see the job differently. I see it as very local. I see my first responsibility to redefine it, to make sure that I take care of not just individuals who need my help in the district, but regions and communities and counties. And I think he sees it through a national lens. I think he sees it as an opportunity to promote an ideology that doesn't really have much to do with the economic well-being of the people in this district. And so we disagree certainly on a lot of issues, and we can talk about those, how I feel about those, and the contrast to him. But I think this election is as much about temperament as it is about where people stand on an issue. Because if you take a stand on an issue and that's it, this is where I stand, then you can't go into a room and negotiate. And I think that anybody who goes to Congress now has to be someone, And you've heard me say many times that I want to be a problem solver, not a partisan fighter. But I think what we need in Congress right now are people with different lenses who can change the conversation. Because insanity, the definition of insanity is if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expect a different result. So we have to send people with new lenses to Congress. And I think I bring the lens of being a small town person, an advocate for small towns, certainly being a teacher, because education is not just an issue for people in my district. They say it's a value, something intrinsic to who we are. And it's definitely it's a lens through which I would see the way I would govern. And because we've never had a woman in the delegation, I think that's an important lens. And I also think my age is an important lens, because I've lived long enough to know that there aren't right and wrong answers. There are yes and no answers. But almost everything is nuanced and lies someplace in between. And I think when you get to be my age, you realize I'm very proud to be a Democrat, but I'm an independent thinker, independent of my president, independent of my husband, independent of party leaders, and I think being 62 puts me in a position where, I'm not going to Washington to be somebody. I've already had a title, and I've had all the attention any one person could need in a state like Iowa. I want to do something. I want to do something with this next part of my life, and I'm very focused on what I want to do. So I think temperament's important, and I think I've got the temperament because of all of those lenses I just talked about that will put me in a room, and I can bring my 8 ideas on healthcare reform or my 6 ideas on energy, and the part of those ideas that I'm going to most pound the table about, and I'll be harder to throw into the wastebasket, which you have to do when you're compromising, is that each one of those 7 or 8 issues that I've layered has a rural component. And I'm not throwing away the rural component of my issues, because that's what makes them special, and that's what makes this district special. And I'm going to go there to represent the people of the district, because basically I see them the same way I see all the people in the town that I grew up. And I found out early in my life what it means to be part of a community when my community supported me and my family when we lost my mom to breast cancer. And interestingly enough, the other day I was heading out to western Iowa to the Clay County Fair, and I stopped in Mallard at Sparky's for a cup of coffee, and there were a group of women sitting there at the table, and they invited me over to sit down, and they were talking about, one of them, her son and his family had just moved back to Mallard. And there were 22 people on the lawn that day when they came back to move them into their home. And so whether it was in the 1960s or whether it's in 2012, that sense of community is just as alive today, whether it's the worst day of your life or the best day of your life. And that's worth spending the next however many years of my life preserving. And I think it's not just about preserving the past, but it's taking those really, really important values. And the people of this district have told me that those values are things like the value of work, the value of service to country, the value of stewardship of the land, education they count as a value as well as an issue, that sense of family and sense of community. And I think that that's what can bring us together, so that we don't have to talk about party, that we can talk about what are our values and then what action should we take based on those values. What action can we take together to make sure that veterans get what they need and young farmers get what they need and our college students get what they need, and that we have an energy policy. So I'm happy to answer any of your questions, because I've probably talked way too long, but I get excited about it.
Let me ask a question.
Yes.
I presume that you believe in a balanced budget.
Yes, I do.
All right, what will you cut when you get to Congress to accomplish that?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to balance the budget, and the most important word in there is balance. So I think there have to be targeted cuts. There have already been some of those. I think there has to be targeted spending.
Specifically what?
I'll go right back to that, I promise. I'll tell you what I will cut. But I just want to make sure that you understand that to me, you can't do it just with cutting. It has to be balanced. You have to cut, you have to spend, and you have to ask people who make $1 million to pay a little bit more. So some of the things that I would cut, LIHEAP is the low-income heating assistance program. Right now, if you get LIHEAP, you automatically qualify for SNAP, or what we would call food stamps. It's a loophole that we can close and save billions of dollars, because you don't necessarily need, people who get money for heating assistance don't necessarily need that SNAP money. They aren't all food insecure. So that's one thing. If we invest $1 in Medicare fraud, we can save $17. That's a huge savings as well. So we can cut Medicare waste, fraud, and abuse. Most of these things are on my website. If we restrict the departments of government from take some of their money for travel, for technology, for supplies, there are other cost savings there. And probably one of the biggest cuts we need to make is figuring out ways to make sure that we cut the cost of health care.
Would you eliminate any of the entitlement programs?
Well, I don't consider Social Security and Medicare, neither of those are entitlement programs. Those are a promise we made. I see them as a covenant that we made with the people who came before me. So those people in my community across Iowa who paid for my public school education, and those people who fought to keep my country free, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that I protect their Social Security and that I protect their Medicare.
Are there any entitlement programs that you would cut?
Well, life is an entitlement, if you want to call, I don't consider, I guess, I don't like the word entitlement. I think right now, the SNAP money that goes to people who are on food assistance, 93% of that goes to older people, seniors who are poor. It goes to children who are poor, and it goes to working poor. So for Steve King, for instance, to call people in our state slackers, in a state where we value work more than anything else, and where people are we've got more people working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet in the state, families, then if you're working, you're not a slacker. And if you've done backbreaking work your whole life, you shouldn't be told that you should have to work until you're 74 years old, which is what he's saying. That's just wrong. And I'm never going to turn my back on the people of this state, because every one of those senior citizens out there, and I'm not one quite yet, but I will be soon, but they made me who I am. And no way will I turn my back on that. I don't consider those entitlement programs at all. So we have to find money in health care, and I think that we can do it. The Institute of Health has said that we waste like $650 billion a year on health care, and they've come up with 7 to 10 different ways that we could cut health care, and some of those I'd already incorporated into my plan. But the most important thing that we need to do in this country that would save money, that would reduce that, is making sure that we don't pay for services anymore. That you can't just go into a hospital and hear on the, find out on reading in a magazine or online about all sorts of services and go in and, get the whole 9 yards. We have to make sure that we're paying for results. And we can save, Governor Kitzhaber from Oregon says, and he's a medical doctor, that what they're doing in their state, if we use that as a model, that we could save $1.5 trillion in this country over the next 10 years in terms of creating coordinated care models. And if you want to see it happening in Iowa, you can go to Fort Dodge, because they got money from the Institute of Medicare and Medicaid to be a pilot project in this. And so, but actually the leaders of all the healthcare systems in Iowa have told me that the marketplace is driving this anyway, that we're moving to coordinated care models where you have a medical home and basically that team of people that's working with you are looking at you holistically and your family and trying to make sure that you only have 1 knee replacement in your life instead of 3, or that they help you with nutrition so that diabetes isn't a problem. I think I saw in your paper the other day, I think it was Dr. Gitchell who was writing about our medical clinic here that has reduced, and I can't remember the number, it was like 47%, I don't know, it was diabetes. They've really reduced the cost here and the number of people who were being treated for diabetes, and I thought that is exactly what we're talking about. Yeah.
In addition to finding ways to save money in the healthcare system, how would you go about making sure people have access? You've mentioned that you're opposed to the individual mandate in the Affordable Care Act. How would you increase access then to the system if we don't do it through private insurance,
Right.
the way the ACA does?
Well, I think back to what I was just saying, that you have to drive the cost down so that insurance providers can actually offer insurance products that will be affordable. it doesn't seem fair to me to force people to buy insurance if they can't afford it. I was walking in a parade in Spencer this summer, and the woman next to me said, I make $11,000 a year. First of all, I thought I had misunderstood her. She makes $11,000 a year. She has a husband, I'm sure he makes something, but my guess is that they're those working poor, probably. But 11,000, and she told me what she spends her money for. And she looked at me, she said, I can't afford to buy health insurance. So, you have to realize, a lot of us have to realize that there are a lot of people who cannot afford to buy it. And so we have to figure out how to make it so they can. If you can reduce the cost of health care so that people can offer insurance products that people can afford, people will buy them. Our children will buy them if it's, if they can afford them. So I think that and access for me is really important because this is a rural district. And I actually have, I've been working in women's reproductive health for the last 3.5 years before I got this. And it was all about getting access to health care to people in rural areas and giving them the education that they needed, the information that they needed, so that they could make wise choices. And you can bring down the cost, and you can provide access and bring down the cost if you work at it and you educate people. And we're seeing the results of that research that we did. That is going to bring down the number of unintended pregnancies. It's going to bring down the number of abortions because we've provided access in rural areas. So you save money.
One of the things that you mentioned on your website is regulations on rural health clinics and hospitals. What are some of these regulations that you think are burdensome and that ought to be looked at?
Let me give you an example. Belmont Hospital, and I wish I could remember her name, but she's the administrator. They have expanded the hospital, but they don't have a grant writer in a small town hospital. So she used her whole staff, and they worked nights, and they worked whenever they weren't doing their other work, basically on the side, to do all the paperwork that brought them millions of dollars of expansion for their hospital. But it really wasn't fair that they have to jump through the same hoops that a large medical center would go through that could employ public relations people and employ people to write the grants. So I'm just suggesting that in cases like that, that we could make a shortened form. Pretty much what we did, I think Hawkeye, what we call Hawkeye, the CHIP program, we were able to cover almost everybody when Tom was governor, but we reduced the form. The form was like 14 pages long, and you had to fill it out every 2 months. And
the program did, or the people did?
The program had. People had to fill out a 14-page form. They had to do it every 2 months. It was prohibitive, so people weren't signing up for it because they weren't going to do that. They didn't know how even to do it. So they reduced the paperwork, and we now have almost every child in Iowa covered because they advertised and they helped people understand that this wasn't a handout, it wasn't an entitlement, they had to help pay. So this is the same kind of thing. If you reduce the paperwork, it allows the small hospitals to access resources that will help them survive and will meet those access needs for the people that they're caring for. And Belmont, that hospital got the largest. I didn't realize when I went in there and was looking at it, and I said, well, where did this money come from? And she said, well, this is the largest USDA grant ever given to a small hospital. But they worked really hard. It added 40 jobs. I've never been in a place where the last year and a half, I've traveled all over the state for 14 years. I've never seen so many happy people as the people working in that facility. I know there was something about that place, the people who were coming there, the atmosphere, but they obviously had worked very hard as a very small team without any help to get those resources. But that's a lot of staff time that they could be using doing other kinds of things. So I think you can regulatory. Every person I've met in the state has said, whether they're teachers, social workers, or they own a Casey's, say we just need to figure out how to reduce the paperwork. Not even the regulation, but that's a whole other area. But people are just tired of doing paperwork instead of being able to do their job. So to the extent that we can reduce the paperwork, and back again to saving money with healthcare, one of the big ones is technology, and almost everybody in healthcare will say, as difficult as it is to make the transition from paper records to electronic records, it's going to save a lot of money. And the RAND Corporation has done a study that shows the impact that that will have on the healthcare system in this country. Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question about personalities as opposed to policy, because I think a lot of people are really bored reading about policy and economics, and I read much more about economics than I've ever done in my life. And you're running against a man who is flamboyant, and some would say charismatic. And the reason I'm asking you this is you mentioned temperament in this, which is, you know, I'm reading through some lines here. I think if you agree with Stephen King's policy, people who agree with his policies really kind of like a guy who's out there, says what he, you know, he means 1, 2, 3, and he's very forceful about that. And you were just talking about compromise, and there is no right and wrong. And so I think that you can be, I criticize then for, I've read negative things on the internet of ducking the issues or compromising or being wishy-washy. So in this campaign, I think in every campaign, personalities are really important. So how do you, because there are going to be people who just vote against Stephen King because people want to vote against Stephen King, because a lot of people find that he is embarrassing. So how do you, you know, kind of, is it important to channel your, you know, Elizabeth Warren, or, you know, get it, not be a compromising person and say there is no right and wrong, and say, and deal with what the kind of things that he says in his issues that, you know, are very confrontive.
We don't have a farm bill, the most important piece of legislation to people who live in rural America. We don't have a farm bill. We don't have an immigration reform bill. We don't have a balanced budget. We don't have a transportation bill. We don't have any of the things that people in this district need to proceed. And a lot of that is because Steve King is incapable of going to Rome and compromising. Nothing's going to happen in this country. We need to move forward because China's moving forward and India's moving forward, Brazil's moving forward, and we're just stuck in gridlock. So if that's what people want, then you'll send people back to Washington to sit there and not make a decision. But, you know, when you vote against, when you say that the most important vote you've taken in 10 years is voting against assistance to flood victims of Katrina, when you haven't voted for health care for the first responders who went into the hole after 9/11, and you don't vote for FEMA assistance to people on the Missouri River, then I think that says something about a person's temperament. When you basically say, you tell the people in your district that you're going to put an earmark in a bill that will pay for Highway 20, and the same thing is true with Highway 29, and then 2 hours later you go in and you vote against that after you've told them you're going to put the earmark in, and you do, and then you vote against the bill. And then you come back home after the bill passes because the other party passed it, and you stand on a stage and you get your picture taken and tell everybody that you were responsible for it. I think that says a lot about temperament. So I think temperament's really important, and I think that you have to be able to get along. And Steve King does not have the respect of the people in his own party because he is in a place where he could be appointed to the head of committees, and he's not been appointed by his speaker, because he's so extreme in his positions that they won't put him in charge of the immigration subcommittee. And so I think he has to answer for things like that. He has to answer for the fact that he hasn't passed one bill except to name a post office since he's been in Congress. And he does one thing in Washington, and he comes home and does something else. So he can go out and be flamboyant all he wants, but when you go on national television and you're from Iowa and you're from this district, then you should be educating people about what it means to live here and why the farm bill's important, and why it is that and educating people that Iowa farmers treat their animals fairly and they take care of the land because their livelihood depends on it. And it's something that we've valued through generations, but instead he's on national television really talking about things that are frankly embarrassing to most of us. I had a man walk up to me the other day at the end of my street when I was taking a walk early in the morning, and he said, I live in Florida part of the year, and it's really embarrassing because people want to know, who is this person, and is everybody in Iowa just like him? I mean, you live with these people in Iowa? So, you know, it's embarrassing to have somebody refer to immigrants in this country as animals. And if he'd just done it once, it would be different, but he's done it multiple times. That's not the way I was brought up. Those are not my values, and I think they're not the values of a lot of people in this state. And I want to be a spokesperson for a wide range of people. When I became First Lady, I represented everybody in the state. And I was always welcome. I felt welcome no matter where I went, in a library or a school or wherever I was. And I'll feel very welcome tomorrow when I go to Orange City because I've been there on my bicycle, I've been in their libraries, I've been in their schools. And we have to get past thinking that this is about being a Democrat or Republican. And I think the person who said it best was the guy at the Greene County Fair who came up to me and he said, I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican, I'm an American. And I wish Congress would start acting like they're Americans too. Because nothing is getting done there. And this country can't move forward unless people do. And I think that's about temperament.
Mrs. Vilsack, your campaign's made a really big issue about Steve King and the pay raises that he's taken. Obviously, he wasn't the only member of Congress to take a pay raise in the last 10 years. There were a lot of Democrats that did so as well. Why is that issue so important to your campaign?
Well, I think it's important because we were in an economic downturn, and to take 5 pay raises when people in your district are suffering I think is something to pay attention to. But he took 5 pay raises at the same time that he was the deciding vote to deny bonus pay to veterans. Now, and it was $1,500, which I know adds up, and it may just be a gesture, but our veterans make around $48,000 a year, and he makes $174,000 a year. So it goes back to Katrina and the guys who went into the hole. These are young people that we've sent off to war, and he's the one who didn't pay for those 2 wars, and he's the one who didn't pay for Part D, and he's the one who allowed tax cuts to millionaires. So now we've gone from a $6 trillion debt to a $16 trillion debt in 10 years. So I just think he has to answer for those things, regardless of what everybody else in the country does. I think that contrast is what matters. And I have said that when I'm in Congress that I won't take pay raise until I balance the budget, and I've simply asked him to turn in his pay raises because I think it's hypocritical. And going back to our values, if we say that we care about the service that these young people gave to our country, and in rural America, it's only 20% of this country, 16% of this country is considered rural, and 40% of the people who go to the military are rural kids. So if we say in this country, if we say that we value, and in this state that we value service to country, then it's not enough just to go to a coming home ceremony and sing the Star Spangled Banner and then go back and go play golf out on the golf course. Or, we have to do something that says that we value this. So what I've tried to do in my plans, which I love to talk about, and which nobody else likes to talk about that much, but is figure out. It's hard to talk about these, in a debate situation when you have 1 minute to answer a question. But Fields of Opportunity is about another generation of farmers. I'm an educator. For me, it's always about the future. It's about another generation of farmers, and it's about finding ways to say to the young veterans who come back, here are opportunities. You are value added. You're a leader. We want you to come back to these communities. But you have to have the jobs, you have to have the education available to them. So it's not just about the pay raise. It's about those 2 things together, and it's about what do we owe? What do we owe these young people who come back? So I think it's more nuanced than just pounding the table about getting back a pay raise.
And would you ask other members of Congress to return their pay? Because obviously it's not just Steve King that passed those wars and without.
No, I mean I'm saying I wouldn't take a pay raise, and I would, I think you have to lead by example. So yeah, I would hope that other people would get back their pay raises as well. I just think that I don't think you can. You've heard me say also that I think a balanced budget amendment is a gimmick. Yeah. It's a way to kick the can down the road. So you can do all sorts of, you can make gestures and do symbolic things, but you just need to take action. I mean, how hard is it? They could have passed a farm bill. They could have passed a farm bill. I believe they had the votes to pass the farm bill. If Steve King flew out to Washington and said that John Boehner told him that they'll pass the farm bill, well, if he could tell him, if he could guarantee him they could pass the farm bill last week, then he had the votes to pass the farm bill. And if he didn't pass it, you have to ask, why didn't he pass it? Well, he didn't pass it because they're not going to just go in and take SNAP payments. at the end of this year when they don't have enough money to meet their responsibilities. They're gonna go in and they're gonna take crop insurance, and they're going to take the disaster programs away from farmers, they're gonna take the conservation programs away from farmers in order to fill the holes that they don't have. So they didn't pass the Farm Bill for a reason, and they could have. And there's no way he's gonna be part of a conference committee, because the leadership of the Republican Party doesn't think that much of him. So, you can't, when I talk about a Washington lens and a local lens, you can't, his goal is to move, he says his goal is to move the country to the right. Well, that's not what the job of a congressperson is, in my estimation. His job is to take care of the 750,000 people in this district, and when a lot of the counties in this district are the counties that lost the most population, and the reason why we lost a congressperson, then somebody should be asking why. When is somebody going to start paying attention to those people, and helping the people of Pocahontas County or Audubon, which lost some of the most people in the last census, and focusing on rural schools and focusing on how we bring people back and create the economic opportunity. Because, we can create a layer of business opportunity because we now can make almost everything from plants. So in a small town, you can create a whole layer of opportunity with small businesses that employ 15, 30, 60 people. These bottles, Coca-Cola is now going to completely bio-based bottles. So why can't you make the bottles in a small town? Why can't Carroll make asphalt that's held together by hog manure? That's what we've all wondered what we were gonna do with all of it all these years. That's the best adherent.
Politics.
Yes, and we can squeal our tires on it. But, we can make just about anything from plants, and to be able to do it in small towns, I think, is the next layer that we can add that's gonna be really important.
Go ahead. In your traveling around this new district, how are the VA medical services? I mean, is there a problem there? Does there need to be some reconfiguration or some additional facilities?
Well, we've got several things happening. We have got the younger people coming back, but there are 400,000 veterans of various conflicts and wars who have yet to be taken into the VA system. So we need to take care of them, and I would like to do that within the next few years. We need to make sure that there is no homeless veteran. My son's been working in Des Moines, where he lives. They just opened last week, the new homeless center there. And it's got, I think, 11 apartments. I haven't had a chance to go down to see it yet, but I was there last year when they were doing the plans. Apartments for homeless veterans that they can live in if they are employed and if they are drug-free. So there are a lot of things that we can be doing for veterans, but we also have to take care of those young people who are coming back.
I'm just thinking, if you're coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan, you come back to your hometown
Right.
in the middle of northwestern
Right.
Iowa, and you need VA care, and it turns out it's 150 miles away to the closest facility. I just don't know.
Well, there are
what's
lots
available.
there are places that are available, and it might be that we could make sure that people can get access more closely. But I've been to a lot of facilities around the state, and one of the great things that we're going to have is telemedicine, and this may work for the emotional health as well. We're going to have emotional health problems. We're going to have brain trauma. We're going to have post-traumatic stress syndrome. And I've been to, I think it was in Logan or Woodbine, maybe both, where the small new health clinics there have telemedicine services, so they'll be able to talk long distance with families and counseling and doing all sorts of things, diagnostic kinds of things. So that goes back to the rural component of everything. For me, if you're really going to focus on this district, then you have to be looking at transportation in the small airports and how we move people and things, but you most particularly have to pay attention to access to care. And I'm particularly interested in veterans. I talked to an Iowan actually was in Secretary Shinseki office, and so she gave me my first briefing. Then I came back and went to the VA hospital in Des Moines to find out. They briefed me on the post-traumatic stress issues and brain trauma, because I've been reading about that. The homelessness issue, we need to do away with homelessness. Again, within a few years we should be able to do that, and that would be a priority of mine, but access always, and to everything, education, healthcare, everything in rural Iowa. And I've always lived in rural Iowa, so I understand the access. I actually think my mother would have lived long enough to see her grandchildren if she'd had access to women's health in small town Iowa back in the 60s.
What is your message to those of us who don't live in rural, small town
But you
Iowa?
do. You do. There isn't anything in this district that isn't considered rural. There are, 6 or 7 different definitions of rural I've discovered through USDA, but this is a town of 30,000 people. You have a university in the town, but even most people don't consider, Sioux City is not, by many standards, is also rural. And certainly its manufacturing base is rural.
Mm-hmm.
So if the farmers are doing well, everybody's doing well. And
Christie, excuse me,
Sure.
I have to leave.
No problem.
Good luck.
thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So yes, what I would say to people who don't live in this district or don't live in Iowa maybe, there are several issues we have to deal with. There are now more people living in rural America, or living in rural Iowa, who do not farm than those who do.
Mm-hmm.
So part of being, and I'm a communicator, this is what I've done my whole life, it's a skill that I bring to this job. We not only have to communicate to people in California or people in Washington or people in New York what we do in Iowa and the culture of agriculture, but we sometimes have to explain it to people who may live in the country who don't live on farms. It creates a kind of tension. So I think I'm because I've always lived in small places, because my livelihood has always depended on farmers, whether it was my father's clients and my husband's clients, or whether it was the kids I taught. I figure that if the farmers are doing well, everyone's doing well. So, but I think I can communicate that sense of community. I think I did with my story of Mallard, with the story of my own growing up in small towns. But I don't think, I wouldn't be living in Ames if I didn't consider it a small town.
Well, comparatively, yes, it is.
Right.
It's not New York. It's not.
Right.
not.
I consider it a small town.
Another thing that you've mentioned, a lot of the things that your opponent has voted against or voted no on. Does that imply that had you been in that seat, you would have voted yes for these things?
I'm not sure, I don't want to do a blanket yes, I would have voted for everything.
Oh, the first responders bill,
Well, yeah, yes. I mean, I think that part of being in Congress is that you build networks. And let me use yesterday as a good example. Amy Klobuchar was with me in Mason City yesterday, and Senator Klobuchar. And and this is something I've been thinking about, how do you reach across the aisle? And 2/3 of her bills she's always had a co-sponsor of the other party. And so I think if you want to create those, you have to create relationships. We know that in small towns, it's about relationships. So when I go to Congress, I want to make sure that I have relationships with people who are across the aisle, and that I would ask them to co-sponsor a bill with me. I'd hope that every bill that I put out there, I would have a co-sponsor. But Amy, to me, is a role model in that regard. She worked really hard on the 2012 Farm Bill, which the Senate was able to put together in 3 days in bipartisan fashion, even though the House wasn't able to do it. And you have to be able to compromise to do that. So, but when you build relationships, you can't alienate the people of Louisiana, or you can't alienate the congresswoman from New York, who is the one who came up to me and said, this is unforgivable, this vote that he took. When you're the deciding vote on a lot of these, when you're one of the only people in Congress who doesn't vote for something, then you're a lone wolf, you're an outlier. And that's what happened with the Farm Bill. I mean, everybody else in our delegation signed the petition that Bruce Braley put on the floor of the House to bring the Farm Bill to a vote. And Steve King would not do it.
Would
He
you
didn't-
have them sign that petition?
I absolutely would have been the first person to have my name on the petition, or I would have had it out there. Yes, absolutely. Because that's what leadership is. If it's the most important bill to the people in your district, and you're not pounding on John Boehner's door and demanding that they pass the bill, knowing full well as he does that they're going to scoop that money out of there and it's going to hurt all of us at the end of this year, it's going to hurt farmers, because he cares more about the fact that he's a Tea Party member and wants to move the country to the right than he does about the farmers in his district. Because every one of us is going to get hurt when they go in there and they take the money, not just for SNAP, but for the safety net programs. and when they take the money for safety. In fact, on September 30th, 3 things are going to happen immediately that hurt farmers in my district. Farmers are going to have a hard time going to the bank to ask for credit for next year for their crops. Young farmers, the beginning farmer programs are going to expire on the 30th of September. I've talked to a lot of young farmers who wonder how they're going to afford equipment and how they're going to afford land, and they've got all sorts of anxieties. They want to be part of the next generation. There will be no promotions for exports. So everything, all the money that helps us promote exporting and trading with other countries, that money is gone. And our livestock producers will have no disaster aid. And dairy farmers who are facing bankruptcy will just have to do without. And that's the immediate effect of the Farm Bill. The longer term effect is what's going to happen at the end of the year when they go in and not only take even more money, it'll be like $184 billion that they're going to pull out of the Farm Bill between SNAP and also with disaster assistance and our safety net for farmers, crop insurance, and conservation measures. So, that's, to me, that's unconscionable. No, I wouldn't vote against the best interests of the people in my district, whether they were farmers or whether they're seniors or whether they're the FFA leaders that I talk to who are now in college who wonder how they're going to get through college without Pell Grants because Steve King voted for the Ryan budget twice, and how they're going to pay off their college loans if they don't have Pell Grants. They're going to have to borrow, and then how do they pay off those college loans? And then, oh yes, we want them to come back to their hometowns and start an agribusiness or come back to the farm. Well, how are they going to do that? So to me, you should be voting in the best interests of the people in your district, not because you have an ideological movement that you feel first allegiance to move to the right. And there are 136,000 reasons why Steve King, why he didn't sign that petition. And the 136,000 reasons are the $136,000 that Club for Growth has given him. Grover Norquist is keeping track of who signed that petition and who didn't. That's not voting in the best interest of the people of this district. So I don't think he's doing his job, and I think that I would be a better voice for this district. It's a new district, and I think it needs a new voice because it's not the same configuration of people that it has been for the last 10 years. It's a whole different demographic.
One of the biggest constituencies within this district, of course, is Iowa State, and the thousands of students who go there, many of whom come from these rural communities around Northwest Iowa. You mentioned the Pell Grants and that, but how do you deal with the cost of going to college? What thoughts do you have along those lines?
Well, first, before I forget, I want to thank you for being willing to host a debate, which Steve King wasn't interested in doing because he didn't want to come talk to the students.
Right.
His first proposal, which you may not even know about, was that he wanted to do this debate in Nevada in August.
I didn't know.
That was the first one,
Yeah.
because he wanted to do it before the students came back and in what I guess he considers the more the more conservative part
Friendly.
of Story County. But anyway, so thank you for that. But yes, the cost of education is huge, and that's where Pell Grants come in, and also being able to access affordable loans, and also having to pay them back. Tom and I, for 10 years, paid back his law school loans. It was like $100 a month. We never thought about it. It was just, that's what we owed. It was worth it. But we could afford to pay $100 a month for 10 years to pay off his law school. But students need to have something that's affordable. So if you're going to be a teacher, or you're the young man at Morningside who stopped me after I spoke there and said, I just got a job at one of the, I think it was at the Newton Prison. And because he got a job at the Newton Prison, there are new opportunities that would allow him to have, it would be paid for. I mean, his loans would be paid for because he's going into the public sector instead of the private sector.
Right.
So if you're graduating from Iowa State and you're going to work on Wall Street and make $100,000 a year, you should have to pay yours back a little faster than that young man who's going to work in the Newton Prison, or me if I'm going into a small town to teach. So there's certainly that as well. So everything that we can do to bring down the cost of education. I think the universities are looking at ways that they can bring down the cost of education, to streamline. I just think about what I took to college, and I've been through this with my own children, and there are a lot of amenities that we have in colleges that are a little, I think that we need to start asking how we can streamline this process and least have options for people who don't have all the opportunities. And one of the things I would say is that not everybody needs a four-year college education. I've taught college freshman English, and I've thought many times, you know, some of these kids, they come to, I taught at a small private school at Wesleyan. They come because they've been lured there to play sports. And many of them would be a lot happier, and they'd make more money because they're not getting jobs when they graduate necessarily. If they had a two-year degree and they were out troubleshooting a wind turbine, or they were out on the farm, or were creating these jobs, if we create these kinds of jobs, then those are jobs that will pay, you know, they're going to pay $30,000, $60,000 a year, depending, you know, maybe even $100,000 if you're going in to run the ethanol plant. That's $30,000. I never made $30,000 as a teacher in a small town, and I live very comfortably. So I think that we can, you know, we can make the case, and we can create those job opportunities where you don't necessarily have to make $100,000. That you can live comfortably and live a good life and feel like you're contributing something to your country, and you're connected. I think one of the most interesting things is that because this younger generation is connected with as long as they have their iPhone, they're connected to their friends all over the world, some of whom they've never met. So 20 years ago, staying in a small town might have meant feeling socially isolated, but I don't think that we have that anymore. I don't think anybody's socially isolated these days, unless they want to be, because we're connected to people all over the world, all the people we ever knew. I'm now connected to everybody I've ever met in my whole life. I don't have time.
Sometimes not always a good thing.
No, I don't have time. It's like, who? I knew you when I was in the second grade. Okay. But you don't have. You can live in a small place, and we're not place bound by work any longer. A young woman I met in Hampton was recruited back to practice law in her hometown, but she said, I can't do it because my husband works in Chicago and he's got this great job. But her husband's employer said, we don't care if you live in Chicago, so go live in Hampton. Do your job. Come to Chicago every once in a while when you need to come to a meeting or something. And so they're living in Hampton with his Chicago salary, her legal salary, and they've got a little girl who rides down the street to her grandmother's house or can ride her bike to the swimming pool. So, you know, it's a different dynamic, and I think I was reading the other day, the Washington Post took my apprenticeship idea. It is the Washington Post, right? And it was 13 ideas that congressional candidates had put forth that they found interesting. I thought the most interesting one was